Welcome to Northern Mystery Archives. Here we don't soften the truth and we don't skip the details. We investigate the forgotten files from the far north of Canada, the disappearances that were quietly shelved, the settlements that faded from every map, the transmissions that were never meant to be heard again. In this channel, nothing is hidden. Every fragment, every silence, every erased trail is examined with the seriousness these cases deserved but never received. If you value cold, atmospheric, minimalist investigations into the unexplained wilderness of the North, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay close, and step with us into the files they hoped no one would ever revisit. Below, we will be speaking about the case titled Caleb Roan, February 5, 1994, vanished remote road incident. It all began when on February 5, 1994, a maintenance worker for the Provincial Highway Department discovered an abandoned vehicle on a seldom-traveled stretch of gravel access road approximately 214 kilometers north of Cold Lake, Alberta. The truck was a blue 1987 Ford Ranger registered to Caleb Michael Roan, age 32, resident of Conklin, Alberta. The driver's door was open. The engine was cold. No footprints led away from the vehicle in any direction. The discovery occurred at approximately 10:43 in the morning. Weather conditions were stable. Temperature measured minus 19 degrees Celsius. There had been no snowfall for 6 days. The ground was frozen solid. Visibility extended for several hundred meters in all directions. The road itself was a single-lane route used primarily by forestry patrols and survey crews. It connected a decommissioned lookout tower to the main arterial highway running east towards Saskatchewan. Traffic on this stretch was infrequent. In winter months, sometimes non-existent for weeks at a time. Caleb Roan had been reported missing by his employer on the morning of February 4th. He had failed to appear for his scheduled shift at the Cold Lake pulp processing facility where he worked as a quality control technician. Roan was known for punctuality. He had not missed a workday in 3 years. His supervisor described him as reliable, methodical, and uninterested in workplace gossip or drama. Roan kept to himself. He did not socialize with colleagues outside of work. He lived alone in a small rental house on the edge of Conklin. He had no known romantic relationships, no history of erratic behavior, no financial difficulties, no legal troubles. The investigating officer from the Cold Lake detachment noted that the truck showed no signs of mechanical failure. Fuel tank was half full, battery fully charged, tires properly inflated, no damage to the exterior. The interior of the cab was clean. A thermos of cold coffee sat in the cup holder. A folded road map rested on the passenger seat. A small duffel bag containing a change of clothes, toiletries, and a paperback novel was found behind the driver's seat. The glove compartment held the vehicle registration, a flashlight with working batteries, and a half-empty pack of gum. Nothing appeared disturbed. Nothing suggested violence or struggle. What troubled investigators was the absence of any logical explanation for why Caleb Roan would have been on that particular road at all. The access route led nowhere he had any documented reason to visit. It did not connect to his residence. It did not connect to his workplace. It did not connect to any recreational area he was known to frequent. When questioned, family members stated they were unaware of any plans Roan had made to travel north. His brother, living in Edmonton, confirmed they had spoken by phone on February 2nd. The conversation was brief and unremarkable. Caleb mentioned nothing about a trip. He mentioned nothing about meeting anyone. He sounded, according to his brother, exactly as he always did. Calm, untroubled, ordinary. The case file was opened with a working hypothesis of voluntary disappearance. Provincial authorities conducted grid searches of the surrounding area. Search dogs were brought in. Helicopters surveyed the dense boreal forest stretching in all directions. No trace of Caleb Roan was found, no clothing, no personal effects, no footprints, no signs of injury or distress. The snow-covered wilderness held no answers. The investigation stalled within a week. Public interest faded quickly. Within a month, the file was transferred to the Cold Case Division. Within a year, it was effectively closed. Caleb Roan became another name on a list of northern vanishings that no one could explain and fewer still remembered. But the file itself contained details that were never made public, details that raised questions no investigator wanted to pursue. The access road where Roan's truck was discovered is officially designated as Forestry Route 73. It stretches for approximately 41 kilometers through dense boreal forest characterized by black spruce, jack pine, and extensive muskeg. The route was constructed in 1967 to service a fire lookout tower erected near the boundary of what was then an unnamed provincial wilderness reserve. The tower was decommissioned in 1979 following budget cuts. The road remained largely unmaintained, used occasionally by hunters, trappers, and survey crews conducting environmental assessments. The area is remote. The nearest permanent settlement is the hamlet of Janvier, population roughly 200, located 53 kilometers to the southwest. To the north, the landscape transitions into an expanse of wetlands, frozen lakes, and unbroken forest, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. There are no cabins registered within a 20-kilometer radius of where the truck was found, no traplines currently in use, no recreational trails. The region is classified as difficult terrain. Navigation without detailed topographic maps is not recommended. Cell phone coverage is non-existent. Radio communication is unreliable due to atmospheric interference common in the area during winter months. Historical records indicate the region has a long association with unexplained events. In 1943, a Canadian military transport plane crashed approximately 30 kilometers east of Forestry Route 73. The wreckage was not located until 1951. All 4 crew members were missing. No bodies were recovered. The crash site showed evidence of a post-impact fire, but survival gear was missing, suggesting the crew may have exited the aircraft alive. A search conducted in 1952 found no trace of the men. The file was closed. The incident is now largely forgotten. In 1976, a geological survey team reported hearing what they described as sustained mechanical sounds emanating from the forest near the decommissioned lookout tower. The team investigated but found nothing. The sounds ceased after 2 days. The team's report was filed with the Provincial Natural Resources Department and never followed up. In 1981, 2 forestry workers reported observing unusual lights moving slowly above the tree line, approximately 8 kilometers north of the access road. The lights were described as white, steady, and silent. The observation lasted roughly 15 minutes before the lights disappeared. No explanation was offered, no investigation was conducted. Local indigenous communities have traditionally avoided the area. Elders from the Cold Lake First Nations describe the region as a place of imbalance. The Cree term used translates roughly to where the land does not hold memory. Traditional knowledge passed down through generations advises against camping or spending extended time in the forest north of Cold Lake. Stories speak of travelers becoming disoriented, losing track of time, and returning with no recollection of where they had been. These accounts are dismissed by outsiders as folklore. But within the communities, they are treated as practical warnings, not superstition. The maintenance worker who discovered Roan's truck, a man named Harold Weir, later stated in an informal interview that the area had always felt wrong to him. He described a persistent sense of being watched. He mentioned that animal activity in the region was noticeably absent. No bird calls, no tracks in the snow. He stated that during his years working the route, he had encountered only 2 other vehicles. Both times the drivers appeared anxious to leave. Weir himself avoided stopping for breaks along the route. He preferred to complete his inspections quickly and return to the main highway. He could not articulate why. He simply knew the place unsettled him. The specific location where Roan's truck was found is unremarkable in appearance. A widening in the road allows space for vehicles to pull over. To the west, the forest presses close. Reconstructing the timeline requires assembling fragments from multiple sources. Caleb Roan was last seen at his residence in Conklin on the evening of February 3rd. A neighbor, Doris Peltier, recalled seeing Roan loading a small bag into his truck at approximately 6:15 in the evening. She did not speak to him. She noted nothing unusual about his demeanor. He appeared calm and methodical as always. Peltier stated that Roan did not seem rushed. He locked his front door, entered his truck, and drove north on the main road leading out of Conklin. That was the last confirmed sighting. Roan's work shift was scheduled to begin at 7 the following morning. When he did not arrive, his supervisor attempted to contact him by phone. No answer. A second call was made at 9. Again, no answer. By 10:30, the supervisor contacted local authorities to report Roan as missing. This was unusual. Most employers would wait longer before involving police, but Roan's reliability made his absence immediately concerning. The supervisor stated plainly that something was wrong. Caleb Roan did not simply not show up. Provincial police began canvassing the route between Conklin and Cold Lake, the presumed path Roan would have taken to reach work. No vehicle matching the description of his truck was spotted. Officers checked rest stops, gas stations, and roadside pullouts. Nothing. It was not until the following morning, February 5th, that Harold Weir discovered the truck on Forestry Route 73, a location completely unrelated to Roan's expected route. The discovery raised immediate questions. Why was Roan on that road? Who, if anyone, was he meeting? What would compel a man with no known connection to the area to drive into isolated wilderness in the middle of winter? The investigating officer, Constable Raymond Trask, documented the scene in detail. Photographs were taken, measurements recorded. The truck was towed to the Cold Lake detachment for forensic examination. The interior was dusted for fingerprints. Only Roan's prints were found. No biological material from any other individual. No signs of forced entry. No indications of theft. The vehicle was mechanically sound. Trask noted in his report that the driver's door was found open but showed no sign of being forced. The door handle functioned normally. The lock was not damaged. The door had been opened from the inside. This detail became significant when paired with the absence of footprints. The ground surrounding the truck was frozen hard. Snow cover was minimal, but sufficient to show disturbance. Yet no footprints led away from the vehicle in any direction. None toward the forest, none toward the road, none toward the creek bed. The only tracks visible were tire marks from the truck itself and the subsequent tracks left by Weir's maintenance vehicle. Trask examined the area within a 50-meter radius. He found no evidence that anyone had exited the truck and walked away. The snow was undisturbed. The frozen ground showed no impressions. Trask considered the possibility that wind had erased the tracks. Weather records indicated wind speeds on the night of February 3rd and the morning of February 4th were minimal, averaging 3 to 6 kilometers per hour, insufficient to erase footprints. He considered the possibility that Roan had been picked up by another vehicle, but no tire tracks, other than those belonging to Roan's truck and Weir's vehicle, were found at the scene. He considered the possibility that Roan had walked along the road itself, where vehicle traffic might have obscured his prints, but the road showed no signs of foot traffic. And the maintenance worker, Weir, stated he encountered no one on the route that morning before discovering the truck. The thermos of coffee found in the cup holder was cold, but not frozen solid. This suggested the truck had been stationary for several hours, but not days. The novel in the duffel bag was a crime thriller. A bookmark was placed 2/3 of the way through. The clothes in the bag were clean, neatly folded. The toiletries included a toothbrush, toothpaste, a razor, and shaving cream. Everything suggested Roan had been prepared for an overnight stay somewhere. But there was no indication of where that somewhere might have been. Constable Trask returned to Conklin to interview Roan's neighbors and acquaintances. No one recalled Roan mentioning travel plans. No one knew of any friends or associates he might have been visiting. Roan's phone records were subpoenaed. In the 2 weeks prior to his disappearance, he had made only 4 calls. One to his brother in Edmonton, one to his workplace to confirm a shift change, one to a hardware store in Cold Lake to inquire about the availability of a specific tool, one to a payphone located at a service station in Bonnyville, a small town roughly 80 kilometers west of Cold Lake. The call lasted 3 minutes. No record existed of who might have answered. Investigators traveled to Bonnyville. The service station attendant did not recall seeing anyone matching Roan's description. The payphone was located outside the building. It was used frequently by travelers. There was no way to determine who Roan had called or why. Attempts to trace the recipient were unsuccessful. The call remained unexplained. It was the only anomaly in an otherwise unremarkable pattern of behavior, and it led nowhere. Search teams combed the forest surrounding the discovery site. Dogs were deployed. Air support conducted thermal imaging sweeps. No heat signatures were detected, no clothing, no personal effects, no signs of struggle. The investigation into the disappearance of Caleb Roan officially remained open for 18 months. During that time, several theories were explored. None provided satisfactory answers. Constable Raymond Trask, the lead investigator, pursued every available lead. He interviewed family members, co-workers, neighbors, and acquaintances. He reviewed financial records, medical records, and phone logs. He examined Roan's personal belongings. He searched for any indication of motive, opportunity, or cause. The investigation yielded only absence of evidence, absence of explanation, absence of closure. Trask's initial hypothesis was voluntary disappearance. Perhaps Roan had grown tired of his life in Conklin. Perhaps he had been planning to leave for some time. Perhaps the call to the payphone in Bonnyville was part of that plan. But this theory did not account for several critical facts. Roan's bank account showed no unusual withdrawals. His savings, modest but sufficient, remained untouched. His paychecks continued to be deposited automatically until his employer was notified of his disappearance. If Roan had been planning to vanish, he made no financial preparations. He left behind money he would have needed. Trask considered the possibility of foul play. Perhaps Roan had been lured to the remote location by someone he trusted. Perhaps he had been killed and his body hidden in the vast wilderness surrounding the site. But this theory also presented problems. There was no evidence of another person at the scene, no foreign fingerprints in the truck, no tire tracks from a second vehicle, no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn clothing, no weapon, and critically, no motive. Roan had no known enemies, no debts, no disputes, no romantic entanglements. He was, by all accounts, an ordinary man living an unremarkable life. Who would want to harm him? And why lure him to such a remote location to do so? The absence of footprints troubled Trask more than any other detail. He returned to the site multiple times. He studied the ground. He consulted with trackers and forensic specialists. No one could offer a satisfactory explanation. The ground was too hard to show impressions in some places, but there were patches of snow that should have recorded any movement. Those patches were undisturbed. Trask tested the theory that Roan might have walked backward in his own tire tracks to obscure his trail, but the distance required to reach cover would have been significant. and the tire tracks themselves showed no evidence of foot traffic. The snow inside the tracks was smooth, untouched. One possibility that emerged during the investigation was that Roan had been picked up by helicopter. A forestry or survey helicopter could have landed near the truck, taken Roan aboard, and left without leaving ground tracks. Trask checked with all regional forestry services, survey companies, and private charter operations. No flights were logged in that area on February 3rd or 4th. No helicopter activity was reported. Air traffic control records showed no unscheduled or unregistered aircraft in the region. The helicopter theory could not be substantiated. Trask interviewed members of the Cold Lake First Nations. He asked about the area's history, about the stories passed down, about whether there had been other disappearances. Elders were reluctant to speak in detail. One elder, whose name was not recorded in the official file, stated that the land north of Cold Lake was a threshold. He said some places existed between states, not fully part of the world as most people understood it. He said those who crossed into such places sometimes did not return. He did not elaborate. He did not claim to know what had happened to Caleb Roan. He only said that the land took what it wanted, and it did not explain itself. These statements were not included in the formal investigative report. They were noted in Trask's personal case notes, but dismissed as anecdotal. Trask was a pragmatic investigator. He dealt in evidence, not folklore. But as the investigation dragged on and every logical avenue led to dead ends, he found himself returning to the elders' words, not because he believed them in a literal sense, but because they captured something he could not articulate. The case felt wrong. Not in the way a crime feels wrong, but in a deeper, more unsettling way, as if the disappearance of Caleb Roan existed outside the normal framework of cause and effect. 6 months into the investigation, a forestry crew working approximately 12 kilometers north of the discovery site reported finding a wallet. The wallet was waterlogged and partially buried in mud near a drainage culvert. Inside was a driver's license belonging to Thomas Edward Sinclair, a resident of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Sinclair had been reported missing in August of 1991. His vehicle, a green Chevrolet sedan, was found abandoned on a logging road roughly 30 kilometers east of where Roan's truck was discovered. Sinclair had been traveling alone. He was 54 years old. He had no known connection to the area. His disappearance was investigated, but no leads emerged. The case went cold. The discovery of his wallet 3 years later raised new questions. Was there a connection between Sinclair's disappearance and Roan's? Were they part of a pattern? Trask requested access to the Sinclair case file. He compared details. Sinclair's vehicle, like Roan's, showed no signs of mechanical failure. It was found with the driver's door open. The interior was undisturbed. Sinclair's personal belongings, including luggage and identification, were inside. No footprints led away from the vehicle. Sinclair was never seen again. The parallels were striking. Trask expanded his search. He contacted provincial archives. He requested records of missing persons cases in northern Alberta dating back 20 years. What he found disturbed him. Between 1974 and 1994, at least 11 individuals had been reported missing in the region bounded by Cold Lake to the south and the Athabasca River to the north. All were adults traveling alone. All were last seen in or near their vehicles. In 7 of the cases, the vehicles were found abandoned on remote roads or forestry routes. In 4 cases, the vehicles were never located. None of the missing persons were ever found. No bodies, no remains, no evidence of what had happened to them. The cases were geographically clustered. All fell within a roughly circular area, approximately 80 kilometers in diameter. At the center of that circle was the decommissioned fire lookout tower near Forestry Route 73. Trask compiled a map. He marked each disappearance. The pattern was undeniable. Something about that specific region was connected to these vanishings. But what? Trask requested additional resources to investigate the historical cases. His request was denied. Budget constraints. Insufficient evidence to justify reopening closed files. The disappearances were spread over 2 decades. They involved different jurisdictions. There was no proof they were related beyond geographic proximity. The request was filed and forgotten. Trask continued on his own. He traveled to the lookout tower. The structure was still standing, though heavily weathered. The stairs leading to the observation platform were unsafe. The tower had been locked and posted with no trespassing signs years earlier. Trask climbed anyway. From the platform he could see for kilometers in every direction. Endless forest, frozen lakes, the faint line of Forestry Route 73 cutting through the trees. The view was desolate, beautiful in its emptiness. Theories surrounding the disappearance of Caleb Roan range from the plausible to the fantastical. In the absence of concrete evidence, speculation fills the void. Some theories are grounded in known facts. Others venture into territory that defies conventional explanation. All share a common thread. They attempt to impose logic on something that resists it. The most widely accepted theory among those familiar with the case is that Roan met with foul play. Perhaps he was lured to the remote location by someone posing as a friend or acquaintance. Perhaps he was killed and his body hidden in the vast wilderness. This theory is appealing because it fits a familiar narrative. People disappear. People are murdered. Bodies are concealed. It happens. But this theory requires a motive. It requires a suspect. It requires evidence. None of these exist in Roan's case. The absence of footprints, the lack of any second individual at the scene, and the complete lack of motive make this theory difficult to support. It is plausible only if one ignores the details that make the case unusual. A second theory suggests that Roan staged his own disappearance. Perhaps he was fleeing something: debt, legal trouble, personal crisis. Perhaps the call to the payphone in Bonnyville was part of an arrangement. Perhaps someone picked him up at the scene and drove him away. His truck was left behind to create the appearance of an abduction or accident. This theory is undermined by Roan's financial records. He left money behind. He made no withdrawals. He prepared for an overnight trip, not a permanent departure. And if he intended to disappear, why choose such a remote and conspicuous location to do so? Why not simply vanish in a city where anonymity is easier? A third theory involves environmental factors. Perhaps Roan left the truck and became disoriented in the cold. Perhaps he wandered into the forest and succumbed to hypothermia. Perhaps his body lies somewhere in the wilderness, undiscovered. This theory is undermined by the search efforts. Dogs were deployed. Thermal imaging was used. The area was combed thoroughly. If Roan had died of exposure within a reasonable distance of his truck, he should have been found. The absence of footprints also contradicts this theory. How does one wander into the forest without leaving tracks? Some investigators have speculated about the involvement of organized crime. Perhaps Roan witnessed something he should not have. Perhaps he was targeted for elimination. But again, there is no evidence to support this. Roan had no known connections to criminal activity. He lived a quiet, isolated life. He was not involved in anything that would attract dangerous attention. This theory exists only as speculation. It has no foundation in the facts of the case. Among those familiar with the region's history, a different kind of theory emerges. This theory does not rely on conventional criminal activity or accidental death. It suggests that the area itself is responsible, that something about the land north of Cold Lake creates conditions where people vanish. Whether this is due to environmental anomalies, geological formations that interfere with navigation, or something less easily categorized, the result is the same. People enter, people do not leave. This theory is dismissed by law enforcement as unscientific, but it persists among locals, and it is supported by the pattern of disappearances documented by Constable Trask. The 11 cases Trask identified share disturbing similarities. All involved lone travelers, all occurred in winter. All involved vehicles found abandoned in similar conditions, open doors, no signs of struggle, personal belongings left behind, no footprints, no bodies. The geographic clustering is undeniable. If these disappearances are coincidental, the coincidence is extraordinary. If they are not coincidental, then something connects them, something that operates consistently over decades. One researcher, a retired geologist named Martin Howell, proposed a theory based on magnetic anomalies. Howell studied topographic and geological surveys of the region. He noted that the area contains significant deposits of magnetite and other ferromagnetic minerals. These deposits, according to Howell, could create localized disruptions in magnetic fields. Such disruptions might interfere with navigation, causing disorientation. They might affect brain function, leading to confusion or altered states of consciousness. Howell's theory is speculative. It has not been tested. It does not explain the absence of footprints or the complete disappearance of the missing individuals, but it offers a framework, a way to think about the cases without resorting to the paranormal. Others have suggested that the disappearances are the work of a single individual or group, a predator operating in the region over many years, selecting victims who travel alone, luring them to remote locations, disposing of bodies in ways that ensure they are never found. This theory is chilling. It is also difficult to sustain. The logistics of such an operation would be immense. The killer would need intimate knowledge of the region, access to resources for disposing of bodies, an ability to operate undetected for decades, and a method for ensuring no evidence is left behind. It is possible, but it is unlikely. The indigenous perspective, as shared by the elder Trask interviewed, offers no clear answers, only acknowledgement. The land takes, the land does not explain. This is not a theory in the conventional sense. It is a statement of observed reality. Something happens in that region. People vanish. The why is unknowable. The how is irrelevant. What matters is the pattern, the consistency, the refusal of the land to yield its secrets. In the years following the closure of Roan's case, 2 additional disappearances occurred in the same general area. In 1997, a woman named Laura Finch vanished while driving from Fort McMurray to Cold Lake. Her vehicle was found on a secondary road approximately 15 kilometers west of the lookout tower. In 2003, a man named David Keller disappeared. His truck was found on Forestry Route 73, less than 2 kilometers from where Roan's truck had been discovered. Both cases followed the same pattern: open door, no footprints, no trace. Both cases remain unsolved. No single theory explains all the facts. Perhaps that is the point. The file on Caleb Michael Roan remains in storage at the Cold Lake RCMP detachment. It has not been accessed in over a decade. The photographs are fading. The reports are yellowing. The case is closed, not solved. Closed. There is a difference. A solved case provides answers. A closed case simply acknowledges that no answers will be found, that the resources allocated to finding them have been exhausted, that the missing person will remain missing, that the questions will remain questions. Constable Raymond Trask retired in 2006. In an informal conversation recorded years later, he stated that the Roan case stayed with him. that of all the investigations he conducted over his career, this was the one he could not let go. He said he still thought about the open door, the absence of footprints, the thermos of cold coffee. He said he believed Roan's disappearance was connected to the others, that there was a pattern, but he also acknowledged he had no proof. No evidence, no way to pursue it further. He said the case felt like staring into a void. The void did not stare back. It simply swallowed everything you tried to throw into it. Harold Weir, the maintenance worker who discovered the truck, left his position with the Highway Department in 1996. He moved south to Medicine Hat and did not return to the region. In a brief statement given years later, he said he never felt right after finding that truck. He said he stopped sleeping well. He said he kept thinking about how quiet it was that morning, how the forest felt empty, how he knew, even before he opened the door and saw the interior, that something was deeply wrong. He said he was glad to leave, that he had no interest in ever going back. Caleb Roan's brother, Michael Roan, continued to search for answers for years. He contacted journalists. He hired a private investigator. He traveled to the site where the truck was found and walked the surrounding area. He found nothing. In 2008, he gave a brief interview to a regional newspaper. He stated that he believed his brother was dead, that there was no other explanation. But he also stated that he would never know what happened, that the not knowing was worse than any answer could be. He said he had learned to live with it, but he had not found peace. The question of what happened to Caleb Roan remains unanswered. The facts are these. On February 3, 1994, a man left his home in Conklin, Alberta. He drove north. He stopped on a remote forestry road for reasons unknown. He opened the door of his truck, and then he was gone. No footprints, no struggle, no trace. Everything that made him a person, a life, an existence, vanished. The truck remained, the coffee remained, the neatly folded clothes remained. But Caleb Roan did not. The pattern of disappearances in the region continues. Between 1994 and 2010, 4 more individuals vanished under similar circumstances. All were traveling alone. All were found, or rather their vehicles were found, on remote roads in the same general area. None of the missing persons have been located. The cases are listed as unsolved. They attract little attention. The public moves on. The families do not. They live with the absence. They live with the questions. They live with the knowledge that someone they loved walked out of the world and left no trace behind. There is no conclusion to this case, no resolution, no final chapter where the truth is revealed and order is restored. There is only the file, the photographs, the reports, the map showing where the truck was found, the empty space where a person used to be, and the knowledge that the land north of Cold Lake holds secrets it will not share. That it has held those secrets for decades, and that it will continue to hold them long after the last person who remembers Caleb Roan is gone. Forestry Route 73 is still there. It is still used occasionally by survey crews and forestry patrols. The decommissioned lookout tower still stands, though it is no longer accessible. The forest is unchanged. The silence is the same. The cold is the same. And every now and then, someone drives that road. And every now and then, they feel it. That subtle wrongness, that sense of being watched, that knowledge, deep and instinctive, that the road goes somewhere it should not, that the forest hides something it will not reveal, that the land itself is waiting. For what? No one knows. Perhaps it is waiting for the next traveler, the next person who will stop at the wrong place at the wrong time and open a door they should have kept closed. The case of Caleb Roan is not unique. It is not even unusual in the context of northern wilderness disappearances. What makes it significant is the absence of explanation, the refusal of the facts to align into a coherent narrative. the way every logical theory fails when confronted with the details. It is a case that exists in the space between the known and the unknown. And it reminds us that there are places, even in a country as mapped and monitored as Canada, where people can still vanish. Where the wilderness can still swallow a life whole. Where the answers we seek do not exist, or if they exist, they are not meant for us to find. The file will remain in storage. The photographs will continue to fade. The questions will remain unanswered. And somewhere, in the cold, silent forest north of Cold Lake, the land keeps its secrets. It does not explain. It does not apologize. It simply is. And it waits.